Today we're going to look at estimating decimals so that we can add and subtract simple numbers. So let's just roll into this and get started. When you're looking at rounding any number, you're really just asking the question, is it closer to one number or is it closer to the other number? Is it closer to 0 or is it closer to 1? When looking at this example, there are some rules that apply to all rounding. So when I take a look at these numbers, I have 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. These are the 5 parts that will always round down. 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. I like to call it staying the same, but we'll talk about that in a bit. The 5 numbers that will cause you to round up are 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, and 0.9. That's why 0.5 or 5 in rounding is the magic number, because there are 5 numbers in the bottom part in the blue, 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and there are also 5 numbers in the top, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, and 0.9, splitting it right down the middle. So 5 and above, you always round up. 4 and below, you always stay the same. We're now going to take a look at these 3 examples, 2.3, 3.4, and 5.8. Let's take a look at the 2.3 first. We're going to be rounding to the closest whole number, and the whole number here is 2. So what we want to ask ourselves is, are we closer to 2 or are we closer to 3? When I take a look at my tenths section here, which is here, I have a decimal 3. And when I see that on my number line, it lines up right here. And I can see that that's in my blue section, meaning I'm closer to 2. That means that I round down to 2, or I like to say it stays the same at 2. So this rounds to the whole number of 2. The reason I like to say that it stays the same is that sometimes people will accidentally round down and say that it's 1. They'll round down the whole number again, simply because when you round up, you go from 2 to 3. So they'll say, oh, rounding down must be 1. But that's incorrect. When you round down, you're actually staying the same, which is 2 in this case. Looking at my next number here, I have 3.4. I'm going to take a look at 3. That's the whole number I'm rounding, and what I want to do is know whether the 0.4 is closer to 3 or closer to 4. And 0.4 is closer to 3 because it's less than 5. So this is going to stay the same as well at 3 when I round it. The next number is 5.8. When I look at this number, my whole number is the 5, so I'm going to look to the tenths, and it's at 0.8. Now, 0.8 is quite large, so it is definitely closer to 6 than it is to 5, so I'm going to round this up to 6. Here are 3 other numbers that may look a little overwhelming because there are so many decimal places, but they're actually quite easy to round to the nearest whole number. The first thing I need to do is I'm going to take a look at 8.53 at the top here. Now, I find my whole number is 8, so the question I ask myself is with looking at my decimal places, is it closer to 8? Or is it closer to 9? When I take a look at this, I now need to take a look at my tenths section right here. The 10th number will tell me whether I round up or stay the same. And I can see that it is 8.5. Now the 5 tells me that I round up because 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 always rounds up. So this means that I need to round that 8 up to the nearest whole number, which is 9. When I take a look at my second example here, 5.434, I find my whole number, which is the 5. I then need to ask myself, looking at the 10th section here, is the 4 in the 5.4, is that 4 mean that it's closer to 5 or is it closer to 6? And I know that the 4 follows in the column of the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it stays the same or I round down. That would mean that the 5 stays at a 5. When I look at my next number, it's 9.81. Now, my whole number is the 9, so I need to look to the tenths column here to tell me what to do. Is it closer to 9 or is it closer to 10? And when I look at that 8, I know that 8 falls in the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 category, meaning that I will round up. So this 9 the 9.8 is closer to 10 than it is to 9, so I'd round it up to 10. In this example, we're actually going to round and then add these numbers together. So I take a look at my 7.8. And when I look at my 7, which is my whole number, I then want to look to my tenths section here, which is my 0.8. Now that tells me that 0.8 is in the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 column, or it's closer to 8 than it is to 7. So I know that I need to round this number up to 8. When I look at the 3.6, I ask myself, is 3.6 closer to 3 or is it closer to 4? And decimal 6 here tells me that it's closer to 4 because it's above the 5. So it's 8 plus 4 equals 12. Another quick example of 7.8 plus 12.2, I'm going to round these to the closest whole number. So I take a look at my 7.8. Is this closer to 7 or is it closer to 8? The decimal 8 here tells me that it's closer to 8 because 8 is in the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 category. So I have 8 plus, and when I take a look at my 12.2, is this closer to 12 or is it closer to 13? And because it says 0.2 here, that is far closer to 12 than it is to 13. So this is 12. 8 plus 12 equals 20. Taking a look at this example, 14.3 subtract 5.9. The first thing I do is take a look at my 14.3. Is 0.3, does that make it closer to 14 or closer to 15? And 0.3 falls in the round down or stay the same category. So this 14.3 is definitely closer to 14 than it is to 15. So I'll write down 14. I'm then going to subtract. I'm going to take a look at my 5.9. I know that 0.9 makes this closer to 6 than it is to 5, so I'm going to round that up to 6. Now 14 subtract 6 is 8. Taking a look at this example, I have 15.2 subtract 5.4. Taking a look at my 15 here, is it closer to 15 or closer to 16? And when I see that the 0.2 would make me round down or stay the same, because it's a lot closer to 15 than 16. So this stays the same at 15. And I'm going to subtract. I have 5.4. Now, this, again, I would stay the same because the 0.4 tells me that I need to round down or stay the same. So this 5.4 means that it's closer to 5 than it is to 6. 15 subtract 5 is 10. This example looks far more difficult than it actually is. I have 17.811. After the decimal 8, everything else is just kind of noise that we don't have to really pay much attention to, simply because I have 17.8. Now this, I'd ask myself, is it closer to 17 or is it closer to 18 with this 0.8 here? And because 0.8 is a lot closer to 18, or because it sits in the decimal 5, decimal 6, decimal 7, decimal 8, decimal 9 category of rounding up, I know that I need to round this 17 up to 18. I'm then going to take a look at my next number. The whole number is 9 decimal, and then the decimals are 0.297. Now after the 0.2 here, everything else I don't really need to pay attention to because 9 decimal 2 would mean that I round down or stay the same at 9 because that 0.2 means that it's closer to 9 than it is to 10. So now I simply have 18 subtract 9 gives me 9. That's it for rounding decimals to whole numbers to add or subtract. So go get started and good luck.